Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for joining us on the Next Online podcast. We're very excited to have you on as our next guest. Now, before we talk about all things marketing, can you take us back to the beginning of your journey? Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how did you get started in your career in marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me here. Um, Gosh, it's been a minute. I've been in marketing a long time, but I didn't always start out here. I actually was
Okay.
a finance person first. So for a lot of
Mhm.
marketers, it's the evil math twin of marketing. But I have to go way back to explain why that was the case. So I came here. I'm an immigrant in this country, and so when I came here, I was a young girl, and as I was growing up, it was always very important that we had a very good amount of stability in life, right? So I could be a lawyer, I could be a doctor, and third case scenario, right? Be a business person. But I fell in love with the business side of things and started on finance mostly because I figured it would be really helpful to understand what drives profitability. Hard to be in a profitable company unless you understand how, the maths.
Yeah.
So I started from that side of the business. But then very quickly, I had a tremendous mentor very young in my career. He was the treasurer of an organization, but he had started and built and sold his own business. And so
Wow.
while he was teaching me how to do functional finance things, he was also teaching me about how a business works and how it runs. And that really motivated me. I ended up going and doing an MBA in the evenings and staying and working for him, and halfway
Nice.
through realized I wanted to be on the marketing side. That's where the action happened. That's where the decisions happened. I have a very natural creative part of my brain. And so I realized that marketing is kind of that perfect blend between strategic, thoughtful business and creativity and messaging and human behavior. And so that was how I discovered it, and really never have looked back. And that was, gosh, over 20 years ago.
Wow, that is amazing. And what an incredible background. I've never heard someone on the podcast yet kind of mention a finance and marketing blend. Which is very interesting. And honestly, you're right. It's very intertwined when it comes
Yeah.
to meeting the goals of the business from just a creative standpoint, too, which is very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you kind of mentioned your mentor, and I know he probably had a big impact on you. Now, what were kind of those moments that shaped the leader that you are today?
Yeah. He was a big part of that, right? He really helped me think about not just the, um, kind of dream state of where you want your business to be, but things you need to consider and really understand the pragmatic parts of business and understand who all the other leaders in the room, what are they thinking about? So as
Yeah.
you progress up your career, you find out whether you're in marketing or any other function, if you're going to be a leader, you have to inspire and you have to be thoughtful about what is important to the other person that you're talking to about your own project. And throughout my career, the mentors that have been most impactful to me have really taught me those different things, right? So whether it's an owner of an organization and what are they thinking about, whether it's the CFO and how do they think about marketing, especially, are we a cost? Are we a positive? What are we going to be? How do we talk in language that way?
Yeah.
So, really kind of understanding the voices that are going to be most important in progressing your ideas has been a big foundational learning that I've had over the years from mentors. And then, I'd say the other piece of it is being open and curious to opportunities. And so many of the sort of left turns and right turns of my career came from mentors and sponsors and advisors giving me opportunities that I might not have actually pursued on my own, but they saw, oh, this is going to fill a skill gap. This will give you a different network. This will give you opportunities that will build on your expertise and history. And so those types of things really shaped my interest and willingness and just saying yes. I can try that. Even if I don't know exactly how to do it today, you have faith in me. I'll go for it and I'll learn and I'll be curious.
Yeah. And I think that's a very important thing now, especially for the next generation coming kind of into the workforce and
Yeah.
seeking that curiosity still and trying to find their path too.
Yeah. Especially now. I think that curiosity and that willingness to learn and pivot in the kind of environment we live in today, I think it'd be very difficult to be successful without having that, that value system.
Absolutely. And now that we're on the topic about leadership, can you tell us about your first leadership role and what really changed how you thought about team building, responsibility, and influence?
Yeah. I had the opportunity to be a leader very early in my career, going back to that original mentor. I was very, very young when
Wow.
he hired me as an analyst. But the two people that were between him as the treasurer of the organization and me as an analyst both happened to have babies at the time and decided to become stay-at-home moms. And so that mentor looked at me and said, you know what? Prove to me that I don't need to hire a manager above you. And so for about 6 months, I just kind of did the next level job, even though I had no qualifications or functional expertise.
Wow.
But what he taught me was, if you're willing to give it a shot and you're willing to listen to your mentor and take the coaching and take feedback, he gave me lots and lots of feedback, which was crushing at first. And then I realized what a gift it was. Um, but that was really my first leadership opportunity, and so ended up having people that were more senior working for me, that were new people working for me, and I was not even 30 years old, and so it was a really um, terrifying and exciting and empowering leadership role. But what I learned was a couple things. One, really trust your team. The people that work for you, um, if you can trust them, they'll give you so much
Yeah.
in return because they're there trying to do a good job and they want to be safe and they want to create new things. And you, as a leader, your role is to really unlock that. And so that was something I learned very early because there were folks that were more senior than me. They knew more than I did about some of this stuff. And so being able to say, hey, listen, you're the expert, teach me how to do this thing, and then we can kind of create some runway and some growth for you. So that was a big one in my first role that I hope I have continued. As I think through now, I hope most of the people that work for me felt that they were trusted and empowered and supported.
Yeah.
um, I think that's probably the biggest thing you can do. And then the other piece really is around setting a vision and then getting out of your own way of thinking it's the best thing since sliced bread. A lot of leaders, especially as you get older, you're like, oh, I've seen this before. I know how this story ends. You got to go do this thing. And that may be true. Or you might say, here's this thing we could do. Let's build upon it together. Or why don't you come back and tell me what you think that we could do either in line with this or better or different, to
Yeah.
set an objective and be open to the different ways you can get there. And I think that, again, is I love working for people that do that for me. And so I try to do that for others.
Absolutely. It's almost like your way of paying it forward in that sense.
Yeah.
Um, and I honestly really like how you mentioned that you were a lot younger when you first took your leadership role, which could be very relatable to our audience today. I
Yeah.
know that you mentioned it was a little bit maybe probably frightening at first,
Yeah.
intimidating the feelings. I
Sure.
know for me, it's very relatable. I've been there. I'm in that seat right now and I want you to kind of go a little bit deeper there. Like what kind of advice could you give someone that's kind of stepping into that currently?
Yeah.
Because it's not easy. It's tough.
No. Yeah. No, it is tough, and I commend you for doing it. I think it's scary for a lot of people, and so scary that people won't take it on. And I think that's
Yeah,
the first piece of advice I'd give is go for it. You've got it. Somebody sees it in you and they're willing to give this to you, or you see it in yourself and you want to start something.
yeah,
Don't hold yourself back, right? We're all imposters until we're not. And
exactly.
so, go for it, I think is the first thing I would say. But be humble. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know your blind spots. If you have a team that you've built around you that you trust and that you've empowered, they're going to teach you as much as you're going to teach them if you let
Yeah,
them. You don't have to be like the boss that knows it all. In fact, most people don't want to work for the boss that knows it all.
yeah,
So, kind of come in open and humble, you'll grow. And then, find people that you're working with and that were working for you that you can create safe space for real feedback. I'll
yeah,
give you an example. In one of my roles, about maybe 8, 10 years ago, I had just become a VP and I didn't really know what that meant, right? What is a VP versus a director and what's the difference and how do I think about it?
yeah,
And the person who was the director that worked for me after we'd worked together for a long time, we had a great relationship, and things were kind of bumpy on the team. And he
Yeah.
pulled me aside and he said, listen, as the VP, I need you to lead. I need you to set a vision. And then I need you to get out of the way and let us make all the mistakes, but then coach us and let's go. And it was
Yeah.
such good advice. And so that I've held with me for a very long time of my at your different roles as you grow, your job as leader will change and evolve. And you might not know when it's happening, but if you have someone that's working with you or for you that can kind of point it out and say, it's bumpy right now and it's actually your fault. And here's why.
Yes.
Listen to that feedback, take that feedback. You're going to cry or, rage, whatever your like response to negative things is. But then once you get over it, you find that does really make not only you a better leader, it makes that person feel better that they were able to help themselves, their team, you,
Yeah.
and you end up with a dream team. And honestly, in that example, it was a dream team after that. We really just did some things that I wouldn't have even thought possible, but because we all sort of played our roles. And he was really instrumental in that.
That is amazing, and the fact that that's kind of instilled today still, even though it was
Yeah.
a while ago, like, it it shows that trust between the
Yeah.
team that you had, like, that's amazing, and I think that's great advice. I'm already, like, taking a mental note.
Good. I'm glad. Here to help.
Yes, absolutely. And now I know we talked about in our prep session that you said you can go in a lot of directions with 2026 trends. There's a lot of
Yeah.
topics out there that we could cover.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest shifts is how leaders prepare their teams for change. Now, how do you see marketing leadership evolving next year as the tech, the budgets, and expectations are kind of shifting very
Yeah.
quickly?
Very quickly, daily. Um,
Yes.
It's funny. I've thought a lot about that conversation that we had, and I think there's a couple of things that are not changing, right? So here's what's not changing: understanding the consumer, understanding what he or she is going to be excited about, is interested in, wants to go purchase or participate in, depending on what career you're in. That doesn't change. That's a fundamental marketing truth that whether it's AI helping them understand what the answer to that question is, or if it's a TikTok ad, or if it's an old Super Bowl ad, you still kind of have to understand that human truth and the human insight. That won't change. And I actually think that's a little bit of I'm going to call it the protective piece for us humans in the world of AI. That's
Yes.
gonna be really hard for AI to figure out, right? But we as humans intuit that, and we can have a conversation and really learn from one another and take that. So I think that's going to hold true. We're gonna still have this need to be consumer centric, consumer empathy, and human to human.
Absolutely.
Um, I do think what is going to have to change as we move forward is understanding the tools you have in the toolbox as a professional and as an expert, and being able to be both creative with it, agile with it, be able to pivot when you need to, and know when to cut bait. Because I think one of the things that happens a lot for it doesn't matter what, this was true in finance, true. When you feel like the thing has to work and you just bully it through and it's not working, at some point you just have to cut bait. In the pace of change that we're going in today, that's why I sort of think about creative and agility together with
Mhm.
this bait note. um, Read the tea leaves. If you tried something, it didn't work, pivot, try something else. Don't overcommit to something that may have worked even last year because it might not work next year. So
Yeah.
that I think is going to be something that we all, again, not going all the way back to, building your team. If the team feels trusted and safe, they'll try those things and they'll come to you and say, hey, Anna, I thought we were going to do this thing and I told you it was going to be right. It's not working, but
Yeah.
here's what I'm gonna do instead. And I think that is where I see, especially on the marketing side, pivots. The other thing that I think is gonna be, potentially, I think, very exciting, but I know could be a little bit, scary as well, is lean in on the AI. You know, it's a tool, it's an enabler. Yeah, it's a little bit different than how we've thought before, but The more you get into it, the more that you understand something, the more you can unlock its potential. And I think for marketing and some of the other professional areas that rely on a lot of data points, a lot of inputs, there's a lot of
Yeah.
competitors out there. The human brain is a little bit limited in how you can process all that data and turn it into something. Use AI to your benefit, right? Get more productive, get more curious, try things in synthetic world before going into the human world. That I think is a big, huge opportunity for us. And I think it's right now. I don't even think it's a week from now. And who knows a
Yeah,
week from now what it's going to do, right? Nano Banana just launched and now we're in some other world, So
exactly. That's very, very true. And I know another thing that I really kind of took note of in our previous conversation too was you mentioned some core pillars that you look for in modern marketing organizations. It was functional, expertise, creativity, curiosity, and agility. Now, can you walk us through why these matter and how you think teams should develop them, especially now that the AI piece is kind of here too?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a perfect bridge to what we just talked about. I think when you think about a high performing team, they are constantly taking in information. They're if they're really great at marketing, they're envisioning opportunities you couldn't see before or other people can't see yet. And
Yeah,
so being able to have a team that not only can really visualize it, but then take that functional expertise and turn that into action, right? How do I think about fundamentally communicating well? What are the functional expertise, the toolkit that I have that teaches me from experience or that I can coach you on to say, hey, listen, when you're giving a message, very basic message, right? Think about your consumer, think about what's important to them, and start with that message first
yeah,
then talk about yourself, right? Basic functional expertise, but unless you've done it a lot of times, it's not necessarily instinctual. So, really building the muscle is important. Being able to then bring in a perspective, right? I am a huge fan of diversity in teams, both age, culture, sex, background, all that stuff, because I'm not living in the shoes of all those other people. I'm living in my shoes. And to
yeah.
be creative and to be effective, having all those different perspectives to challenge you has to be a part of that team. And I think that's where your creativity goes from it's interesting to wow, that's really cool. And man, it hits right here because I got that human. I understand that target audience, right? I'm speaking to them because I'm listening to them from someone on my team. So I think
Yeah.
there's a bit there. That's where the curiosity comes in, of course, as well as being open to it. I like I said, I can only know the culture I live and the cultures I've learned about. Be open to that. Learn new things. You'll find that there is, humans are humans, right? We all sort of have the same basic passions in life. We all want to be loved. We all want to be, we're tribal. So there's all
Yeah,
that kind of stuff that's true. But how it manifests is going to be very different, and how brands and businesses can manifest with them versus at them, I think is a big piece of the puzzle. And that's where when I think about building a team and having those four areas around function, creativity, agility, right? And then that curiosity, when they're all working, you're going to really get to brands that can do magical things.
absolutely. And I honestly couldn't agree more. I love how you kind of portion those out into four pillars. It's very, very true. And I know we talked about the AI piece too again, but I want to bring
Yeah.
it back up because now my next question is, now that it's being more integrated into the processes in across various teams, even beyond marketing, I
Yeah.
think I want to know from your side, how do you see a team structure, roles, and career paths evolving, being now that we have like this toolkit that you're referring
Yeah.
to right at our fingertips?
It's such a good question. It's like the $1,000,000 question because I don't know that I have a perfect answer for you. I don't know if anyone does. If they do, I'm going to question that. But, but I think, we all kind of have to learn with it. And I kind of, I came into marketing, this is going to so age me, but I came into marketing right around the internet bubble. And so we had a lot of the same questions there, right? What's the internet going to do? How all
Yeah,
of a sudden do I still need all these people? Because I can just Google it, right? And this is kind of the next version of that, and with steroids. So I think the real answer is we're going to find out. I really hope that, especially people that are working on their education stay, are curious and open to coming in and being an expert to teach some of us older people, hey, did you even know that you could do AI this way or use it that way or try this thing or I'm going to develop an opportunity? Because more often than not, that's where the really big breakthroughs come is when someone young with new ideas without the history and the blockers of everything that the rest of us have done comes in
Yeah.
and says, have you considered? Would you consider? Let me try it and show you.
Yeah.
That language, I want that person on my team all day long. All day long. That's who I'm gonna hire because they're not gonna come and tell me that they're better than the AI, they're gonna show me how to use it. And that's a really important skill set that I think young people coming in order to build a career in this new world that we're starting to envision, I have to assume that's going to be important. The other piece of it too is, you know, probably because I think of it as a tool, efficiency does not replace creativity, right? Productivity does not
Absolutely.
replace good ideas. And so doing things faster, it might be a little bit more exhausting, but I don't think it replaces the need for the humans. I just think it gives us more runway to try to do
Yeah.
different things and spend less time on the more mundane. So, I'm the optimist a little bit on the AI world. I try to ignore not ignore, but I try to avoid falling down the rabbit hole of like, yes, but all, the robot world we're going to live in, because I don't think that that's going to happen. But I think if we can look at it as helpful to humanity in lots of ways, forget marketing for a second, right? Think about what it can do for us in science. Think about what it can do for us in medicine. It's a world
Absolutely.
of opportunity in so many different industries, and the ability to work across industries because you now have that information at your fingertips. I'll give you another example. When you do innovation, you're always trying to find sparks of inspiration, right? And you kind of look
Yes.
at what you know and you look at your business. We never really had, you could kind of go look at a competitor and what are they doing and, kind of Google that stuff. Now you can use AI and say, if I was a pet company like I am, launching a medicine, what would a medical company try to how would they approach it, right? Or how might a veterinarian approach an idea? Or
Yeah.
how might, IKEA approach an idea? That was never a thing you could really just find out.
It's true.
Now, you have kind of a partner in crime that can say, "Well, have you considered it from these different ways? Because this is how, a science company or an IKEA or somebody else would come at it." That's a great unlock for innovation and creating combinations of ideas that otherwise would be in silos. And I think there is some real power, again, when I'm thinking of somebody young coming in and having that open mindset and the growth mindset, that's a way to use the tool.
Absolutely. And I like how you mentioned that it's almost like our partner in crime. I know
Yeah,
that earlier on when we first launched the podcast, there was an early guest as well, and she described it in a way which I never forget. And she described it as a thought partner. And
yeah,
the partner in crime situation is kind of similar too in the
yeah,
way you're describing it because I say it all the time when I'm having this conversation on the podcast and these things get brought up. It's like it's so true. It's there to kind of help us get there a lot faster and kind of bounce ideas
mhm,
off. And even what you mentioned earlier, kind of tested it in like the synthetic environment before
yeah,
going to the
yeah,
humans and
yeah,
presenting your
right.
idea. It's amazing. It changes a lot of things.
It really does. It really does. And I think, I still go back to if you are a curious person, if you're a creative person, if you are humble, you're going to find this as a huge accelerant to your career because,
Absolutely.
you're open to trying it.
Exactly, and I think that curiosity is, like, the biggest thing to have in this era that we're
I
in, especially
agree.
the next gen.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree completely.
So how do you think experimentation and innovation with operational stability, especially when your teams rely on you to navigate constant change? I know this is a little bit different from the AI
Mhm.
piece, so I kinda wanted to steer
Yeah.
there to educate next gen on this.
Yeah. Um, I think there's a balance, right? We're especially in a for-profit world, right? You have a business to run. You have oftentimes there's a manufacturing facility. There are a lot of people, with a lot of capital.
Yeah.
Um, Having that understanding of the business, I think is critical. And, again, I'll talk to about a mentor. My first marketing mentor. So my first marketing job was actually in England, which is a whole nother story that we don't have time for. But it
Oh
was in
my
England. And
goodness.
he was, and the marketing department had been moved into where the manufacturing facility was at the time. And
Wow.
so the first thing he taught me, because I was a finance girl, right? And he's like, okay, welcome to marketing. And he said, the first thing we're going to do for the first couple days of the job is we're going to walk the factory every morning. Every morning, we're going to walk the factory. And I was like, okay, that's really interesting. I get it. But really, you start your day out this way? And he goes, I do, because he's like, at the end of the day, if you don't think about how things are made, who's making those things, where does the widget come off of the line? You over there in your ivory tower are going to come out with, some purple, whatever, wiggly, sparkly thing. And I'm going to look at you and go, can't make that in my factory. So that's going to cost you money. It's going to change the operation. It's going to be a completely different business proposition that we might not be able to make viable. So he really taught me to stay grounded in what business are we in while still creating opportunities that might have to force some change, but you're not, reinventing the wheel. You're working off of a business that you have. And I think
Yeah.
that's hard for a lot of people. I've always worked in manufacturing companies so that I get grounded in the manufacturing first. And I think no matter what industry you're in, get grounded in how it works first, because you can't innovate, you can't create unless you understand how it's made, whatever the made means, right? If it's a physical or a
Yeah.
service. Um, it makes you a much better leader, and it makes you much more quite frankly, impactful to the rest of the C-suite, because they know that you're not coming in without having that perspective, that you've considered it, you've made friends over there, you've asked, the head of operations or the guy on the line, what do you think if I did this thing? And you have a perspective that's really grounded in the work you're doing. And that is the opposite of AI, quite frankly. It's really just getting in there and getting your hands dirty.
I really like that approach. And honestly, that for me personally, everything that you're describing, I kind of had that mindset shift just a few months ago, right? 6 months ago. And it completely changed my perspective when I came to approach certain scenarios and deal with, different clients that I deal with on a day to day basis. And it really opened up my eyes to a whole other perspective, like you're
Yeah.
saying, because you see everything in a different light and it makes you, at least in the marketing space, like it makes you just a better marketer. You're able
Yeah.
to actually connect with maybe the audiences that you're trying to connect with
Yeah.
because you understand exactly what's going on. Like you've walked the halls, you
Yeah.
understand a little bit of the culture, the space. Like it,
Yeah.
it really is different.
Yeah. It's a game changer. And especially early in your career, if you can make that part of your onboarding, your first 90 days should always include walking the floors, the operations, the customers, right? If you sell to, you know, a grocery store, make sure you're going in the grocery store and looking at your products and your competitor products. What do they look like on the shelf? What are people,
Yeah.
are you, as you're watching the, woman run down the aisle with their three toddlers, are they spending any time on the aisle? Probably not. Pay attention to that stuff because
Yeah.
that'll help you as you're thinking about packaging, impactful in store, all that stuff, because you're there and you can physically see it. And don't assume it looks like something until you've gone and looked at it.
Exactly. And I couldn't agree more with you. And now, kind of shifting gears towards the last two questions of the podcast, and they're more geared towards the next generation. What's a leadership lesson you've recently learned or have been reminded of that influences how you lead today?
Hmm. Um, so I am in a role now that is very collaborative and it's very reliant on building relationships and influence without necessarily, owning the P&L, right? When you get to a certain point, your P&L isn't necessarily your own and you're working through all these other things. And
Yeah.
I think that again, it's a little similar to what we just talked about, but putting yourself in the shoes of the P&L owner or the functional owner, depending on, where you are, um, and asking the questions. What's keeping you up at night? What are you worried about? What are your objectives for the year so that when I build mine, they're not in contradiction to yours, right? Because
Yeah.
clearly, if you're in a relationship and collaborative kind of role, and my goals are opposite to yours, guess what? You're not going to go with what I'm asking you to do. That's just not going to be
Yeah.
helpful. And so I think it's something I've known, and relationships are a huge part of a marketer's, you know, job always. But you get more and more reminded of it when you're so reliant on relationships to be successful. And I think that is, it can be exhausting, it can be slow, but it can be really rewarding as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And for the next generation of marketers who are listening, those stepping into transformation roles or even preparing for the rapid change that we've talked about throughout this whole episode, what advice would you give them as they build their own career paths?
Yeah. Don't underestimate communicating. It's a hard skill actually now in the world we live in, especially for
Yes.
young people. The way that young people communicate with one another is very different than the way that older generations communicate with one another. And while, of course, it would be so much easier if we communicated the way you communicated, we don't. We just don't. Just like, and by the way, it's easier for me too. If you could just understand the way I said it, that would make my life easier.
Yeah.
But that's not the reality, right? We are working probably for the first time in not just multi-generational organizations, but multi-generational, right? Older people are
Yeah.
staying on longer. Younger people can come in, at earlier stages into a company. And so communicating effectively, it's critical. And so you have to really be paying attention to, how am I going to influence the person I'm trying to influence? What is their communication style? How do I help them trust me? How do I help them get inspired by my idea? How do I listen to their feedback, not necessarily the way maybe a friend might tell me, but really it's
Yeah.
a boss, or a colleague, because it's different. And what I will tell you is, especially now, the most successful young people I work with are, what I love is they will just say it to me. They'll be like, "Hey, listen, like the hierarchy is so different now." And they'll just say it
Yeah.
to me, just say, "Hey, this is what I feel and this is what I think." And I'll say, "Great. And let me tell you the same." And sometimes that doesn't land really well. And so you
Yeah.
have to kinda just be open to that, right? Because it's, if you're gonna be willing, I'm gonna be willing. If you're not willing, then neither am I. And that becomes, I think, a game changer for careers. Again, not just because, we weren't necessarily brought up on social media and young people were, but more because business is people. It just really is, right? And people have to communicate to be successful in anything that they're trying to do, whether it's in a marriage or in a company or having a child or even a pet, which mine is running around here somewhere. You got to be able to communicate. So that's my biggest advice is, learn the language of the people you're working with, learn the style that's going to make you most impactful, and listen to, feedback and suggestions, and adapt, because adapting is not giving up your authenticity. Adapting is, unlocking your potential. And that, I think, is a really, important thing for at all ages, not just young people, at all ages. Like I have to learn how to, I mean, I Snapchat with my teenage boys because that's how they like to communicate. And I love it.
Yes.
Absolutely love it. I had to learn, and
Yes.
I definitely did some really cringy things, but now I know, right? And so I think it goes both ways.
No, absolutely. And I honestly, I love how you mentioned that because my family is the same way. We all have a group chat on Snapchat because that's how me and my
Yeah.
brother communicate. And they're like, we're
Yeah.
going to have to learn.
You got to
So
learn.
that's,
If you don't learn, I mean, my mom is a lifelong learner, and I learned that from her, that you could decide to become old or you could decide to get with it. And
yeah.
I just think it's really important to get with it. It's more fun.
It is. You're more in the know. And again, like it's adapting to the change and it could honestly be better instead of just like
Yeah,
not leaning in and staying behind. And then you're just like, you feel left behind almost.
you do. You feel old, and nobody wants to feel old.
Well, honestly, I had such a great time talking with you today. I learned so much from you. And I just wanted to thank you again for joining us on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Karina. What you do is really wonderful, and it's been a lot of fun. So thank you.